Welcome to the deep dive. We take the info you're looking for and really boil it down to the essentials fast. Think of it as your quick way to get up to speed.
Yeah, cut right to the chase.
Exactly. So today you asked us to look at a YouTube tutorial. It's from the sound test room, and it's all about the Native Instruments Maschine mk3.
Right, specifically focusing on the variation mode and the chord mode features.
And you shared this one because, well, you were curious about how to generate musical ideas, maybe some interesting variations in Maschine, but without needing, tons of music theory background.
That's the core idea. Our mission here is really to unpack these features. We want to show how they can kind of spark creativity, maybe lead to some of those aha moments in finding musical ideas.
And what's great, I think, is how the tutorial makes it clear that these tools are actually pretty approachable, even if you're kind of just starting out.
Definitely. We're going to look at some practical techniques that honestly unlock a surprising amount of potential with just a few clicks. It's not as complex as it might seem.
Okay, cool. So where should we kick things off? Maybe with the drums and this humanized thing in variation mode.
Good starting point, yeah. So the tutorial, it starts by setting up just a basic 4-bar drum pattern. Simple stuff.
Okay.
They load up a kit, the Funk House kit, I think it was. It's in the Maschine library. And then they just tap in a simple hi-hat rhythm. They use note repeat for 116th notes.
Right. So you get that very steady kind of machine gun hi-hat sound initially, very precise.
Exactly. Almost robotic. And that's where variation mode comes in handy. The first option they explore is humanize.
And this is the cool part, right? It takes that super rigid pattern and just makes it breathe a little, makes it sound more natural.
Precisely. Humanize basically tweaks two main things. First is velocity range.
Velocity, like how hard the drum pad is hit, virtually speaking.
Yeah.
Affects the volume.
You got it. So they set a range, say, between 79 and 122, and Maschine then just randomly adjusts the volume of each hi-hat hit, but only within that specific range.
Okay, so not completely random volume, just ran within the limits you set.
Exactly. Think about, a real drummer. They never hit every single cymbal with the exact same force. There are always tiny variations.
Right, those little dynamics give it the feel.
Yeah, the groove, the character. Humanize is essentially trying to mimic that subtle imperfection. Makes it sound less like a sequence and more like someone actually playing it.
So it's those little volume ups and downs.
Hey.
Makes sense. What was the other thing it adjusts?
The other part is time shift. Now, this lets you introduce really, really tiny variations in the timing when the notes actually land compared to the perfect grid.
So not perfectly on the beat every time.
Not perfectly locked, no. They set it very low, like 5% briefly. But even that tiny amount pushes notes just slightly ahead or behind the beat, almost imperceptible shifts.
And that also adds to the human feel, stops it sounding too quantized or rigid.
Exactly. It's those little, almost subconscious timing things that make a performance feel alive, rather than something just snapped perfectly to the metronome.
And the tutorial pointed out something important. You can apply this variation just to specific sounds, right? Like only the hi-hat.
Yeah, that's really useful. You can pick just one pad, just the snare or just the hi-hats, and apply humanize just to that sound within the group. You don't have to do it to the whole kit.
Okay.
They actually add a kick drum quickly, too, and they mention quantizing it.
Quantizing. What does that mean in this context? If humanize is making it less perfect, what's quantizing doing?
Good question. Quantizing is kind of the opposite. It takes the notes you played, maybe they were a bit off time, and it snaps them perfectly to the nearest grid line, like 116th notes or 18th notes.
So it cleans up the timing, makes it precise.
Exactly. So in this case, they quantized the kick drum. They wanted that foundational beat to be really solid, really locked in.
Okay, so you get a tight kick, but then the hi-hat on top has that looser, more human feel from the humanized setting.
Precisely. Best of both worlds, really. Keeps the backbone steady, but adds some organic feel elsewhere.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so moving on from drums. They use variation mode for bass too, but a different setting, random.
Yeah, exactly. This is where it gets interesting for generating ideas almost out of thin air. For the bass, they start a new sound in a new group. They pick an analog bass sound from the library.
Okay.
And the tutorial makes a point about the root note and the scale being pretty important here.
Right. They said the first pad you hit kind of sets the root note C in their example, and then they switch the scale from just chromatic, which is all the notes, to minor, C minor. Why do that? What does setting a scale actually achieve?
Well, think of a scale like like a palette of notes that are known to work well together. They create a certain mood or feeling. The C minor scale has a specific set of notes that tend to sound, maybe a bit melancholic or serious.
Okay, like a pre-approved set of notes for that key.
Pretty much. By telling Maschine, hey, we're working in C minor, you're putting up guardrails. Any notes it generates using these features will belong to that C minor scale. It helps ensure things sound musically coherent, not just random noise.
Gotcha. So it keeps the randomness musically useful.
Yeah.
And then they hit the random variation mode.
Yep. So in random mode, Maschine can automatically create a sequence for you. You tell it the note range, like how high or low the notes can go, maybe C2 to C3 initially. You set the probability, like how likely is it to put a note on each step. They start at 100%.
A note on every step.
At 100%, yeah. And it bases it on the current grid setting, which was still 116th notes at first. And it generates a 4-bar pattern.
But hang on, didn't that make the bass line sound like super busy, all those 16th notes?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, 16th notes for a bass line, it just gets cluttered,
Yeah.
It doesn't really groove for most styles. Way too frantic.
So what was the fix?
The key step was changing the grid resolution, making it coarser. They switched it from 116th notes to 14 notes.
Ah, okay. So instead of 16 possible spots for a note in every bar, now there are only 4. Much simpler rhythmically.
Exactly. Much more typical spacing for a bass part. Then they hit random again, using the same note range and scale, but now with that 14-note grid.
And that gave them a usable bass line.
Bingo. Suddenly, with that wider spacing, the random generation produced a much sparser 4-note pattern over the 4 bars, something you could actually use.
That's really clever. Using randomness, but controlling the density with the grid.
It is, and what's cool is, even though it's random, because it's locked to that C minor scale, it often comes up with ideas that sound genuinely musical. Maybe little patterns or rhythms you wouldn't have thought to play yourself.
Like happy accidents within the key?
Kinda, yeah. They even show hitting random again to get different bass line ideas. Still C minor, still quarter notes, but a new variation. And they play with the note range too, maybe going up to F3 or C4, just exploring.
It really is like hitting a generate button for ideas.
It really is. And then importantly, they start tweaking the bass sound itself. Adjusting the filter, the decay, maybe adding some glide between notes.
Right, so you generate the notes, then you shape the sound to fit.
Exactly. You're not just stuck with the raw output. You use it as a foundation, which leads nicely into the next part, using the same random idea for a lead melody.
Okay, so another new sound, another group.
Yeah.
An analog lead synth this time.
Yep. And they actually swap the initial sound out pretty quickly for one with less attack, a softer start to the note. Just shows you can keep refining things as you go.
And the grid for the lead, what did they use?
They tried 18th notes, then I think flicked back to 116th briefly. Again, just experimenting with the rhythmic density. How busy should the lead be?
And then hit random again. Same process.
Same idea. Set a note range, C3 to C4 this time, a bit higher than the bass stick to the C minor scale, and boom. Maschine generate a lead melody sequence.
And the tutorial seemed pretty impressed with the results, even from pure randomness. Like, you can get actually cool sounding stuff this way.
Absolutely. It really lowers the barrier. You don't have to sit there agonizing over the perfect melody from scratch. You can let the Maschine offer some starting points within your chosen key.
Takes the pressure off.
Totally. And then they show another trick with the random mode, adjusting the probability. They lowered it from 100% down to maybe 70, 75%. What effect does that have?
Less than 100%.
Yeah.
So it's less likely to put a note on every single grid step. Creates more gaps, more space in the melody.
Exactly. You get sparser, less dense patterns, more rests, more breathing room. It's another way to control the feel of the generated part, not just the notes themselves, but the rhythm too.
That's quite nuanced control, actually.
It is. And then just to add more life, they show automating a parameter while the sequence plays. I think it was the filter cutoff on the lead synth.
Right, making the sound brighter and darker over time as the melody plays.
Yeah, as movement, expression, stops it from being just a static loop. It shows how these generated parts are really just starting points for more sound design and performance.
Okay, so we've got humanized drums, randomly generated bass and lead. What about chords? That feels like a big hurdle for beginners sometimes.
It definitely can be, which is why chord mode is such a powerful feature. They demonstrate this by creating a pad sound in another new group, a polysynth from the library, specifically a pad type.
And then they just turn on chord mode. What does that actually do?
It's brilliant, really. Chord mode lets you play a full chord, multiple notes played together harmonically just by hitting a single pad on the Maschine.
Seriously, one pad plays a whole chord.
Yep. You activate it, and then you choose the type of chord you want. So to keep things consistent with the C minor key they established.
Chose minor as the chord type.
Exactly. So now any pad they hit will play some kind of minor chord, but which one? That's where the chord set option comes in.
Ah, okay, so it's not just one minor chord.
No, that would be boring. The chord set gives you access to a whole collection of predefined chords that fit within the key and scale you're using. They navigate to the minors section in the chord sets.
And that shows different variations of minor chords.
Yeah, different voicings, different inversions, basically, different ways of arranging the notes of minor chords that all sound good within C minor. It's incredibly helpful because you don't need to memorize all those chord shapes yourself.
The machine just knows them for you,
Mm-hmm.
based on the scale. Like a harmonic cheat sheet built in.
That's a great way to put it. A harmonic cheat sheet. So then they just record a simple chord progression over their 4 bars just by tapping different pads.
And each tap lays down a full, harmonically correct chord.
Correct. And because they set the key to C minor and chose a minor chord set, all the chords generated automatically fit together musically. No bum notes, no awkward clashes. It takes away a huge amount of the guesswork involved in harmony.
Wow, okay. That combination, the variation modes in this chord mode, seems incredibly powerful, especially, like the tutorial said, for people maybe newer to making music.
That's absolutely the key takeaway. These techniques, like humanize, random, and chord mode, let you generate genuinely interesting musical building blocks without needing deep music theory chops right away.
It's about using the tech to get ideas flowing.
Exactly. Leveraging the tool to spark your creativity, to explore possibilities you might not have found otherwise.
And the speed is impressive too. Laying down drums, bass lead, chords. You can get the foundations of a track sketched out really quickly.
Definitely a potential cure for writer's block. Or just a way to rapidly try out different vibes, different directions for a song.
Yeah, just hitting random again or trying a different chord set could take you somewhere completely unexpected.
Absolutely. And the flexibility to easily change the overall key or scale and then regenerate patterns to fit that new harmonic context, that's huge for experimentation.
So just to kind of wrap up the key points, we saw Humanize adding that subtle organic feel to drums, little timing and volume shifts.
Making things sound less robotic, more alive. Then random variation proved surprisingly useful for generating bass lines and melodies, especially when you control the grid density and keep it locked to a scale.
All right, generating ideas within a musical framework. And finally, chord mode just takes the complexity out of harmony, letting you play full, musically correct chords with single pad presses.
Yeah, building that harmonic foundation quickly and easily in your chosen key, it really streamlines the process.
It really feels like these tools let you focus more on the bigger picture, on the overall arrangement and sound, rather than getting stuck on, the theory behind every single note right at the start.
Precisely. It's about getting those fundamental building blocks in place efficiently so you can then get creative with arranging, mixing, and sound design.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If you take these kinds of generative tools, these starting points, and then combine them with your own taste, your own unique ideas, what kind of music could you actually create?
That's the exciting part. The possibilities are huge. It encourages that exploration.
Definitely food for thought, something for listeners to maybe try out themselves if they have access to this kind of gear. Well, thanks for digging into that with us today.
My pleasure. Lots of interesting potential there.